In this video, we will briefly surmise how Montana's performance standards came to be. In 2012, the National Academies published a framework for K-12 science education, which provided guidance for the development for the next generation science standards. This guidance aimed to strengthen science education and support teachers in preparing all students to be college and career ready. In April 2013, the next generation science standards were published by Achieve. Montana was one of the 26 lead states. The NGSS were written using the framework and were determined to be consistent with the content and structure of the framework by a team of individuals chosen by the National Research Council. The NGSS authors created performance expectations that include the 3 dimensions of the framework and are organized by grade level to provide science educators with a learning progression outline of what students should know and be able to do in their K-12 education. Achieve created a matrix illustrating the progression of the DCIs across grade levels from the framework's grade band endpoints for each component DCI. For our POW science work, you might be wondering, why formative assessment? And why are we using NAEP items as a starting point? In 2014, the National Research Council published a report on developing assessments for the NGSS. In this report, NAEP was identified as one of the existing assessments that may pave the way for how states monitor science achievement. The report acknowledges that the current NAEP assessment is not a perfect alignment to the NGSS, but provides a model for what assessing the multi-dimensions may look like. In the NAEP 2009 to present framework, the science items include practices, cross-cutting concepts, and content similar to those described in the framework. We are also using NAEP to leverage the exhaustive review Montana science teachers already did in the summer of 2014, where over 342 science items were examined for their alignment to the framework. With this large resource and item pool at our disposal, we will look for exemplars to help define what formative assessment and formative strategies look like in our statewide repository. Montana chose to sign on as a lead state in the development of the NGSS. Lead states made a commitment to consider them during their next science standards adoption. Before we adopted these standards, it's important to know that the last science standards adoption that we had took place in 2006. In 2009, the state wrote the Essential Learning Expectations, or ELEs, in an effort to provide guidance and support for teachers. As we discussed in the very first video of this series, law describes what standards and assessments must take place in the state. The 2006 standards provided benchmark statements at the 4th grade, 8th grade, and upon graduation. These were the foundation for our MontCast CRT for science, and our science assessments with the CRT occur at grade 4, 8, and 10. Adopted standards then become administrative rule. Because the science standard adoption process is so involved and has implications outside of standards, Montana was very careful in its consideration of the NGSS. For example, in the fall of 2013, many teachers voluntarily participated in the crosswalk exercise, or A Critical Look at NGSS for Montana. This consisted of looking at the commonalities and differences between Montana's 2006 standards and those with the NGSS to identify any gaps or great overlap between the two. Next, in the spring and early summer of 2014, many teachers, including MPress, participated in the verification round of A Critical Look at NGSS for Montana. This included an alignment scoring and verification of the results from the crosswalk. As I mentioned in the previous slide, in the late summer of 2014, 15 science teachers from across the state also participated in an item classification study using NAEP items. This consisted of making alignments to the framework and to Montana's 2006 standards. In 2015, the OPI began facilitation of content standards revision for science. This included bringing in a writing team and a review team under the guidance of the Content Standards and Instruction Division at OPI. Let's flip to see what the negotiated rulemaking process for adopting standards was for Montana. In 2005, the Board of Education created a standards revision process to assure Montanans that public schools are providing all children with challenging academic expectations. A 2015 update created the negotiated rulemaking process for developing content standards. As with revision and review teams, the negotiated rulemaking process aims to bring educators, content experts, and members of the public together to review the standards. This image shows a copy of this letter from the Superintendent of Public Instruction during this time and what the letter looked like to select members based on these requirements. As you can see, members were selected based on representation of the following groups: school district trustees, school administrators, teachers, school business officials, parents, higher education, and taxpayers. This Montana Code also requires an economic impact statement to measure the potential cost to schools of implementing new content standards. At the same time, local school boards have a responsibility to adopt curriculum aligned with those state standards. The Montana Board of Public Education also plays a role in adopting content standards. Among the board's chief duties is to approve standards of accreditation. The board's revision process outlines that standards should be rigorous, clear, measurable, and address cultural diversity. The Office of Public Instruction's role in creating content standards is to facilitate the content writing and the legislative process. After the revision and negotiated rulemaking committees have completed their work and progress has been reported to the Board of Public Education and the Interim Education and Local Government Committee, the Superintendent of Public Instruction makes a recommendation to the Board of Public Ed for adoption of these proposed standards. The next steps include scheduling public hearings and the opportunity for the public to submit written comments to the Board of Public Education. When the hearings have wrapped up, it's up to the Board of Education to approve the new content standards. As you can see, the process for adopting science standards is quite lengthy, comprehensive, and astute to ensure that our learning goals are appropriate for our students. Here's a look at Montana's writing team. You may see some familiar names and faces from this team with those who are in our POW Science workshop. Here's another look at the negotiated rulemaking committee. We will reference this document in our work because it's helpful to see where Montana's standards compare to the NGSS, where the writing team has provided guidance on content and skills to emphasize, where the Indian Ed for All language has been included, and where there are opportunities to connect across content as defined by the authors, and what foundations of the three dimensions are identified for each performance expectation. Additional reasons to use this document include that there is an identifier. If we look at the farthest left-hand column, there's an NGSS identifier, and it is also linked to the topic arrangements. This allows us to look at grouping our resources based on topic, or also ways we can filter by these topic arrangements. In the second column, we have links to the actual performance expectation. And if you follow this link to the actual performance expectation, it's easy to navigate on the Next Generation Science website to the evidence statements, the foundation boxes, and also to the applications across other content. In the third column, there's language found in Montana's adopted science standards from 2016. So anytime you see any red text, there might have been a deviation from the actual Next Generation Science Standards from those that Montana adopted. In the fourth column is the Montana's writing team's guidance or points of emphasis that were identified in their review work. The fifth through the seventh columns are where we can see a breakdown of the foundation boxes, or the actual three dimensions that are called for in each performance expectation. In the eighth column, we can see the IFA cultural connections and/or significance piece as described by the Montana Standards writing team. This IFA is different from the actual IFA standard language that was adopted with administrative rule. The final, or the ninth column, includes connections across domains. It is fitting to end this Origin of Montana Science Standards video with a definition of the standards. As you may recall, standards articulate a clear vision of the learning goals for students, and they articulate the student performance at the conclusion of instruction. They are not a description of curriculum, and they do not dictate instruction. With this in mind, the NGSS are written as the performance expectations, or PEs, and the NGSS requires contextual application of the three dimensions by students to help focus on how and why, as well as what. The NGSS are standards, not curriculum. Instead, the NGSS should be thought of as goals. They reflect what a student should know and be able to do. In our POW science work, we will attempt to provide formative assessment resources and strategies that science educators can draw on to help them assess if their students and instruction are on track for these learning goals. Our work will need to be mindful of not necessarily trying to assess the PEs, as that is more of the aim of the summative assessments. Instead, we can think about instruction and classroom activities that help build towards the PEs. There will be no wrong way to go about our work because 1, we are in uncharted waters, and 2, There is no prescriptive curricular or instructional rule that defines how we choose to assess instruction or student learning.